Okay, so let's take a look at assignment number 8. Assignment number 8 is asking you to implement a decimal to binary encoding algorithm like the one that was presented in the lecture video using Scratch programming language. The program should prompt the user to enter a decimal number less than 256 and display that binary equivalent pattern as shown in the screenshot below. The stage should also include a sprite displaying your name. So the way I built this is to create multiple variables, this variable being bit 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1 to display on the screen in binary. The number that I'm asking in the prompt is to have the user enter in a number below 256. Actually is a typo, it should say 256, and then it'll convert it into a binary equivalent. So begin this project. We go to Scratch, start a new project, and what we want to do is, of course, have an event such as when the green start flag is clicked to begin a control loop, and we'll just make it a forever loop. That's the easiest one to use in this case. And what we want to do is we want to prompt the user using the sensing blocks to ask the user to enter in a number less than 256 to be converted to binary. Now, of course, once the user replies to this, the answer is going to be in the special variable called answer. So what I want to do is I'm going to prompt the user to enter this value and then assign the value to a variable, a new variable. So I'll go to data, make a variable, I'm calling it DEC underscore in. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it decimal in. And what I want to do is once the user has entered a number, hit the enter key, then I'm going to set decimal in equal to answer. So I have to go back to the sensing blocks, collect answer as a block that fits into the spot here on the puzzle piece that says set decimal in to answer. So basically all this does is collects a value from the user. They type in the number and then it gets assigned to the variable decimal in. What I want to do next is I want to go to the control instructions and I want to create a if then else plugin. This puzzle piece is going to check to see if the number is indeed less than 256. So the way I can do that is I can go to the operators and I can find the relational operator for less than, drag it and drop it into the if then block. On the left side I will have the variable decimal in, and on the right side of the relational operator I'll have the number 256. If the number is less than 256, then we can convert it into binary. If the number is not less than 256, what I'm going to do is output a message that says this number is too large. Alright, and we'll let it display for about 5 seconds and then we'll start the whole thing over again. Now, if the value is less than 256, then we can convert it. And what we want to do is create a number of variables, one for each binary bit, and then control whether it's 0 or 1 depending on what the requirement is to match the decimal number. So we're going to make a variable. I'll call this bit 128. I'll create another one, and I'll call it bit 64. Bit 32. Bit 16. Bit 8. Bit 4. Bit 2. Bit 1. So there are my 8 bits: 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1. What I want to do is display them in the way that I'm showing on the example in the assignment document. So to do this, what we need to do is go to the variables that we have set up in our stage area and right-click on each of them, switch them into large readout mode. So there's bit 128, there's 64, and all I'm doing is I'm right-clicking on the variable and changing it to large readout mode, and set them up in a row like we learned in the algorithm. Okay, so at this point what we need then is to add in into this socket right here, which is true when the decimal input is less than 256, we need to put in some decision or control structures here. The one that I'd like to use is the if then else. And what I want to do is I want to check to see if decimal in is large enough to subtract 128 from decimal in, which will convert into the bit 128 binary. So the way I can do that is go to the operators, use the greater than operator to plug into the if statement, and what I want to know is if decimal in is greater than 128 or 127. So if it's 128 or greater, then that means we can set bit 128 to a 1 and subtract, and there's a couple ways we can do this. I'm just going to change decimal in. We're going to subtract 128 from it. So again, what we did is we checked to see if decimal in is big enough for us to take 128 out of it, and that would be this question here, decimal in greater than 127. If that's true, then we set bit 128 true, and we change decimal in by subtracting 128. If, however, it's not true that it's greater than 127, all we can do is set bit 128 equal to 0. So that takes care of bit 128. We just duplicate this for each of the other bits, 64 through bit 1. So I just did a right click and copied the if construct there for 128, and now I just need to make it 63. If it's greater than 63, then we can take and set bit 64 to 1 and subtract 64 from decimal in. Otherwise, if it's not large enough, then all we can do is set bit 64 to 0. And then we just duplicate this again. Whoops. So we duplicate this again for bit 32, and then bit 16, and then bit 8, and so on and so forth. And that's basically how you do it. Okay, I hope this helps.